loan that we're going to talk about is mortgages. A mortgage is a long-term loan for the purpose of buying a home. A down payment oftentimes is required, and it's a portion of the sales price of your home that the buyer initially pays to the seller. Okay, the amount of the mortgage is the difference between your sale price and the down payment. So you put down a down payment, it's taken off of the original price, and so that's the amount of your mortgage then. Okay. Some companies called mortgage brokers offer to find you a mortgage lender willing to make you a loan. So a different bank that's willing to give you a mortgage. You have two different types of mortgages. You have fixed rate mortgages that have the same exact monthly payment for the entire period of the loan, and the interest rate does not change. You have varying rate mortgages, or also known as adjusted rate mortgages, or ARMs, and their payments change depending on the interest rates, which could be good and bad. If the interest rate goes down, that means your payment goes down. But unfortunately, if the interest rate goes up, then your payment also goes up. So you've got to be careful with those adjusted rate mortgages. So let's go ahead and talk about buying a home and the different kind of ideas in buying a home. It says here, most lending institutions require the buyer to pay one or more points at the time of closing. That is at the time at which the mortgage begins. So you have not only the down payment, but sometimes you have to pay like closing costs and points toward that home that is required. And it depends on your bank and your lending institution. A point is a one-time charge that equals 1% of the loan amount. For example, if you require 2 points, means your 2% of your loan amount is required at the time of purchase or at the time of closing. A document called the Truth in Lending Disclosure Statement shows the buyer the APR for your mortgage. In addition, lending institutions, banks, can require that part of the monthly payment be deposited into what's called an escrow account. That's an account used by the lender to pay real estate taxes and insurance. So lots of different things kind of go into purchasing a home. All right. So the first thing we've got to talk about is a formula that we're going to use. Again, this formula is on your formula sheet, so make sure you know where it's at. You can find it on the back page there. You'll be able to use that for your test. This is the formula that we're going to use to calculate the payment for any installment loan. This is for car payments. This is for mortgages. This is for credit cards. So any type of loan you take out, you could actually figure out what your payment is supposed to be based on this formula. P is, remember, your principal amount, the amount that you borrow. R is your interest rate. N is how many times a year that you're going to make this payment. And then T is the number of years that you have this payment for. Putting it into this formula will give you the amount that your payment is supposed to be each month. Okay, so let's do a mortgage example. It says here the price of a home is $195,000. The bank requires a 10% down payment and 2 points at the time of closing. The cost of the home is financed with a 30-year fixed mortgage rate at 7.5%. So we're going to do a couple different pieces. The first one says find the required down payment. So if our home amount is $195,000 and our down payment is 10%, we've got to figure out what 10% of $195,000 is. So remember, of is multiply by 10% or 0.10, and so our down payment that we're required is $19,500. So before you could even purchase a home, you need to make sure that you have $19,500 to give to the bank, okay, in order to be able to even talk about buying that house. So then part B says, what's the amount of your mortgage? Well, your amount of your mortgage isn't now $195,000 anymore because you've just put in a big chunk of money toward that amount. And so we've got to find the difference of the original cost of the home minus your down payment to find the amount that your actual mortgage is going to be, which is now $175,500. That would be the amount that you make your payments on. Okay. Some banks, some institutions also ask you to pay for points or closing costs. In this particular example, it asks us to pay 2 points toward our closing costs. So we're going to take our mortgage amount, that's the $175,500, and it says 2 points, which is about 2% of that amount. So we've got to figure out what 2% of our mortgage amount is. I ended up calculating 3510 So we need to make sure that when we sign out, before we can get our keys to our house, we give them another $3,510. That does not come off the amount of your mortgage. That's just in addition to give to your bank. So $3,510. Okay. So here we go. Let's figure out what our monthly payment is going to be. This is excluding any sort of escrow taxes or insurance, so just based on the mortgage amount. Remember, there's a formula to help us figure out the payment amount. We have our principal amount, the amount that we're going to borrow. That's the $175,500. We have our interest rate. Remember, the interest rate was 7.5%, so as a decimal 0.075. And is the number of times we're going to make this payment. We're doing monthly payments, so that number is going to be 12. In our denominator, we have 1 minus 1 plus our interest rate 0.075 divided by n. That's the number of times we're going to make the payment, so that's every month, so 12. And then we have a little minus or negative 12 times, and then how many years are we going to have this home mortgage for? Well, it says here we're going to have a 30-year fixed mortgage, so that T is going to be for 30 years. We're going to have to make this payment every month for 30 years. Okay, again, here's the hard part. We've got to make sure that we put this in our calculator the correct way. Before I do that, I want you to look at this exponent here. It might be a little bit easier to off to the side figure out what 12 times 30 is, so we can put that in our calculator without having to do 12 times 30. I think you end up getting, what, a negative 360, right? So let's call that negative 360 and put it in our calculator that way. Okay, I'm going to show you how to put this into the calculator. Now, everybody's calculator is a little bit different, so you might have to play around with yours for a little bit and make sure that you know how to calculate it and put it into yours correctly. So just be careful. So here's just one example. We have the 175,500 times, I'm going to do parentheses, 0.075 divided by 12 parentheses equals, that's my numerator, right? Then we're going to divide it by parentheses 1 minus parentheses 1 plus 0.075 divided by 12 parentheses, and then I'm going to raise it to the negative 360th power, and I'm going to end my parentheses. So be careful with that denominator. Lots of different parentheses in there. But I pretty much entered it just like I have written it down on my notes, and I'm going to push enter. So hopefully you got the same answer as me. I got $1,227, and if I'm rounding for money, it would be 12 cents. $1,227.12. Please, please, please play with your calculator. Make sure that you know how to enter that correctly, because if you mess up on the payment, then everything else from there gets messed up. So please be careful. Okay, you might have to Google it or YouTube it with your particular calculator, but make sure you get the same answer as I do. Don't just trust that you can do it. Make sure that you practice a few times, okay? All right, so it looks like every single month for the next 30 years for our home, we have to pay $1,227.12 as our payment, okay? So this last part of this question, kind of interesting, asks us to find the total interest that we paid over those 30 years. So let's think about this. If I make a payment every month for 30 years of $1,227.12, let's figure out at the end of those 30 years how much money I actually gave to the bank, okay? So I made a payment of $1,227.12. I'm going to do that every month for 30 years. So I'm going to do times 12 times 30. At the end of those 30 years, I'm going to end up giving my bank $441,763, yowzers, and 20 cents. Now, how much did the house actually, how much did I actually pay for the home, right? Or what was our mortgage amount? Remember that our mortgage amount was this $175,500, not the $195,000, because remember we put down the down payment, so we actually only borrowed $175,500. If we only borrowed $175,500, but we paid over $400,000, what's the difference there? How much money did you give your bank in just interest? You ended up paying $266,263.20 in just interest. That's actually, you paid more in interest than you did your home. Unfortunately, most of us don't have $175,000 in the bank to pay cash, so we have to take out these mortgages. That monthly payment was still pretty high, but in order to be able to afford that house, we have to separate it, expand it into those 30 years, and we end up paying a lot of money in interest. You just have to be careful, but kind of crazy to think about, huh? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and then we'll continue on with this section here in a second, but practice those problems, play around with your